Pain and suffering is part of our world, but it's not always a bad thing. Welcome back to Encouraged. If this is your first time, please consider subscribing. That way every week you can continue to be encouraged. Here's another disclaimer. I am not a doctor or a counselor, so if you need that kind of help, please see a professional. You know, many times pain and suffering is necessary for your brokenness. Why? To finally let go, to finally move on, to finally go towards God. Think of a broken wheel on a child's wagon. As you see it bend and break, our first response is usually to try to fix it. We might weld it, but it's not as good as how the manufacturer left it. Or we'll try to put tape on it, that extremely tough, expensive tape. And maybe at first it works, it looks pretty good, it's pretty smooth, but after a couple days, it gets weak, wobbly again. And maybe this time you try adding another rod to it or something, and now after all that fixing, it just becomes an unpleasant experience. Now that wagon sits in the corner somewhere unused with a dangling wheel. It's just an eyesore now, until one day you decide to throw it away, and that burden is lifted, and now it's not a hazard to you or your child, and it's no longer taking up any space. Now you can move on to better things. You know, suffering can develop a strong character, a better perseverance, and more hope. It'll take time to see positive effects of suffering and pain, and it will take time to peel off those layers that have been adding up over the years. But the Word of God is filled with examples of people who went through just that. People who suffered, who were depressed and hurt, but developed in truly amazing ways. Think of Job. Think of Genesis 37, the story of Joseph being sold into slavery. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to suffer as much as Job or Joseph did, but maybe your step to recovery is to talk about it with someone. You know, it may not be that you need advice, but instead, you just need people around you to hear your situation. Maybe you just need to hear yourself talking about it out loud. And after talking and expressing your pain and feelings, this emotional part can heal you. You can almost work out your own problems as you hear yourself talk about it. Let me say it again. Sometimes you just need someone to sit with you and hear you out. I love this example I'm about to give you in Job chapter 2, starting at verse 11. Let's read it. When Job's three friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, heard about all the troubles that had come up on him, they set out from their homes and met together by agreement to go and sympathize with him, Job, and comfort him. When they saw him, Job, from a distance, they could hardly recognize him. They began to weep aloud, and they tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their heads. Then they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights. No one said a word to him because they saw how great his suffering was. So check this out. Job went through a lot. Read the whole story if you have time. And his friends heard about it. They got together and said, hey, we got to meet our boy. We got to talk to him. We got to help him out. We got to sympathize. All right, let's go. But when they saw him, they were like, whoa, this guy, he looks bad. And knowing that the pain he's going through is something they couldn't help him with, they said, let's just suffer with him. Let's tear our clothes. Let's look as bad as he did. Let's throw dust in our head. And let's sit with him. So he had some pretty decent friends. Now, let me clarify. Eventually, they were rebuked for some of the things they said. But I want to focus on the act of sitting there with someone and suffering with them and the act of actually talking your problems out. They saw him looking like a mess. They were outside. They could have went inside and sat down, had some coffee. No, let's just sit out here. And eventually, if you keep reading the story, Job spoke and he got it all off his chest. He said everything he had to. He complained. He was hurting. And eventually his friends got to speak and they reminded him of God. They said this in verse 21. He will yet fill your mouth with laughter and your lips with shouts of joy. Yeah, there was more back and forth from there on, but I just want to point out to you the need, even for believers, to sit and let it out. God can build you up even through your suffering. Suffering brings you to God. Don't always feel that it's a horrible thing to go through suffering. This is the first point that'll lead you towards growth. You know, sometimes the cause of our pain is not our fault, right? Other times it is. For example, my past, I made many mistakes that took me to places I never want to go to again. But I continued doing these silly things that got me in big trouble until I was hit really hard with reality, with a big consequence. And that consequence hurt. It made me depressed. It made me anxious. But that pain saved me. That torment caused me to never again do what I used to do by God's grace. And from then on, I left my old life. If there's anything you leave with today, leave with this. Do not let your pain slow you down, but let it drive you to a better and more enjoyable life with God. May God bless you and your families. Thank you so much for joining us here on Encouraged. If this has blessed you in any way, please be sure to share this with a friend. And as always, we'll be praying for you, and we hope to see you again. God bless.